It's a fireside chat called Industry X Youth, the importance of developing and guiding the next generation of talent. We'll be having Dara Dotz from Worldchanging Ventures. And Dara, you are able to turn on your camera and mic now. She's the CTO and co-founder. And then there's also Leanne Gluck. So Leanne, where did you go? There you are, Leanne. Okay, sorry. I have to find you to be able to give you your camera and mic privileges. Leanne Gluck, who's an additive manufacturing strategy lead at Autodesk. And then we also have Claire Chabaud. So Claire, go ahead and turn on your camera and mic as well. She's the CEO of FusionBra. Now, I have been asked to see who exactly is making up our audience right now. So if you're in the chat and you're in this audience, can you please place into a chat exactly if you're a student, if you're a professional, if you're a teacher or a professor. We just want to know who the audience is so we can best tailor this panel for you. So go ahead and do that. Okay, so it looks like we have some bioengineering students, and we have teachers. So it looks like it's a relatively academic panel so far, with a good mix between youth and teachers. Engineering degree again. Teacher.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so a lot of young people. So I'll let you guys do is go along with your conversations. Oh, artist and professor, there we go again. And towards the end, about 10 minutes left, I'll jump in and field a couple questions in the Q&A. So audience members, be sure you place your questions in the Q&A. It will be a great panel.
Awesome. So I will go ahead and start in here and ask Claire and Leanne. I'm very excited to have you guys here with me, as you're both also, I'm very blessed to have you both as very good friends. And I was wondering if we could just do a quick, for those of you in the audience that don't know who we are, what we've done, I'll give you a quick recap on myself. And so I am now CEO of Worldchanging Ventures, and we're doing flexible off-grid habitats focused on sustainability and next-gen homes. But my background primarily is in additive manufacturing in crisis zones and outer space. But I want to let Claire and Leanne give us a quick intro on what they're up to, and then we'll launch into dialogue. Claire, do you want to go?
Good. Okay, I'm going. Hi, I'm Claire, founder of FusionBra, which is the first tech-enabled made-to-measure bra powered by 3D printing.
Hi, everybody. I am Leanne Gluck. I lead additive manufacturing strategy at Autodesk, and Autodesk is a multinational software company. We have a number of software products like Fusion 360, AutoCAD, Inventor, that enable tools to make the world a better place.
Awesome. And since we have such an interesting group, the three of us were chatting last night, and we wanted to kind of talk about what we wanted to share with you all. And we realized that the three of us are not really the traditional 3D printing women. So I thought it might be fun for us to kind of share what brought us into additive and how it brought us down our career path. Leanne, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I spent the first 10 years of my career actually in youth education. I ran a national self-esteem program. That was my first kind of foray. And the way that I got into manufacturing was actually one day I was walking down the street in New York, in Harlem, New York, and it was raining, and I was carrying an umbrella, and it kept flipping inside out in the rain, and I got really mad about it. And I thought to myself, why has no one ever made a better umbrella? So I ended up going back to school, getting an MBA with a focus in global sustainability and manufacturing at the Ohio State University. And when I graduated, I literally started Googling the future of manufacturing. I was excited about the intersection of technology, sustainability, entrepreneurship, and manufacturing. And that is how I found 3D printing, and was really just excited about the vision of how the idea of local distributed manufacturing could help us to bring manufacturing back to the US. And that was kind of how I began. And I'm not sure how much I'm supposed to share about my background here, but I ended up from that. I went and I worked at the Clinton Foundation. I led kind of cross-sector collaboration with a number of different industries, academia, nonprofit, and government to think about how we could reshore manufacturing in the US. And from there, I actually met the CEO at the time of 3D Systems, a man named Avi Reichenthal, who was really in 2014 really leading the way in the future and vision of where 3D printing could go. And I ended up starting the social impact arm at 3D Systems and focused on really around social impact initiatives and education initiatives at 3D Systems, some sustainability initiatives. It's part of how I got connected to Dara, and we can talk a little bit more about some of the exciting projects that we worked on. And then from there, I went to an organization called America Makes, which was the National Additive Manufacturing Institute, and I was their Deputy Director of Education. So kind of took a nod from all the education work that I had done before and kind of married that with my industry knowledge of 3D printing and really focused on how could we integrate 3D printing into what's called the K through J education system. So both kindergarten and kindergarten through 12th grade, through university, through jobs. And now I'm here at Autodesk focused on additive manufacturing strategy and a more of a go-to-market business role. And so that's my background, my overview, how I got into the space. Hopefully I answered your question, Dara.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's all about getting just kind of a general background of all of our careers, because it seems like there's a lot of young people on here that might be curious to ask different paths to get into it. So thank you for sharing. And Claire, you have a unique intro.
At some point when Leanne said, and then I met Dara, I feel like it could also like be a question of the panel is how we met Dara. Because every time there is a story behind that. Yeah, so just to give a little perspective, I'm 27, so I'm a little younger and just like out of school for 2 years now. So my story starts in China, in Shanghai. I was traveling with my grandma. I was 18-year-old and very body conscious as every young woman that doesn't match the beauty standards, let's say. And I found the exact same bra in Shanghai that I found like 2 weeks before in Paris. And at this moment, I was like, what? How this is possible? Like, we need to get a product that is made from our bodies. They are so different. You can sell the same bra to a European woman and a Chinese woman in terms of morphologies. And so it's when I started to really get this problem at core. And one day, everything changed for me in 2014 at school. So I really hope I can bring some perspective there. I was in business and economics, so no engineering for me. But one of my teachers told me, if you want to disrupt an industry, you have to think about the totally opposite industry. So from lingerie, woman, oh, thank you, Koja. So from lingerie, woman, I went to war, destruction, men, and there was the first 3D printed guns. So basically, my presentation at school had a Victoria's Secret model on the right and a 3D printed guns on the left. And I was saying, we are going to 3D print bras. And that was the beginning on how I get into it. But what I really hope I can get through this this chat is that it's not obligatory, mandatory to be an engineer. You have to be passionate first. I think it's the first thing. And Dara, how did you arrive here?
How did I arrive? Yeah, it's kind of a funny story. So I always loved making things as a kid. I loved like sculpting with clay, and I loved wood shop. At my age, not many young women were in wood shop. I used to sneak in early morning before high school, before all the boys got there to do my projects. And then I was told that I could never do art as a career and that you'd be a starving artist, you know? So I was like, okay, I had to put that out. And I really wanted to be an astronaut, as all of us did. And then I was told I wasn't smart enough and my vision would prevent me from flying. So I went into therapy. That's what I started studying. And then I decided that I didn't want to be alone in a building all day long helping people, because I thought that wouldn't quite be the right fit. In case you can't notice, I move around a lot. It's hard for me to sit still. So what happened is as a joke, I went to this school fair, and I, with my father, because I was a bit older at this point, and in Denver at the school called Metropolitan State College of Denver, and they had a school fair. There was a guy with all this crazy furniture and products, and I was like, "What's this?" And they're like, "This is industrial design," and it like blew my mind because it showed me that there was a way to make products and help people in tangible ways. So I wound up going into industrial design, not quite engineering, but really focusing on solving problems for others. And we actually had a 3D printer at school and a CNC machine. And I believe I'm the only person who never even looked at it, tried it, or used it, because I thought 3D printing was cheating and only to make toys. So I spent like years, I used to hand carve my own jigs and fixtures. It's very funny to make all my furniture. And it wasn't until I left school and started doing crisis response that I actually wound up getting into using robots and 3D printing. And so some of you know the story. If you're curious about more of a story, you can look me up on TED. But I digress. What I did is I went down to Haiti, and I didn't know what people needed just yet. I wanted to see what could be done to help the situation after the earthquake. And a friend of mine was a nurse, and she'd run out of medical supplies. And she was delivering a baby, and she had nothing sanitary to tie off the umbilical cord. So she actually cut her last pair of latex gloves and tied off the umbilical cord of the infant with those gloves, which is a great fix, except she didn't know that she was going to have to deliver 4 more babies that night. So that meant that she was going to be delivering them barehanded, putting her life in danger with potentially HIV positive women. And that's what it hit me, that this is ridiculous. People don't have medical supplies. These people are risking their lives to help others. And it occurred to me, I bet you we could use those stupid 3D printers to print simple plastic umbilical cord clamps. And I know it sounds really funny, but that was my big aha moment. And that led into me reaching out to people at MakerBot, getting a donated 3D printer, learning how to 3D print in the slums of Haiti. And then to keep up my habit of 3D printing in Haiti, I had to find a job. And someone suggested that I talk to these guys at NASA Ames, because apparently they were also 3D printing in austere environments that didn't have supply chains. And that was for NASA. So I wound up getting a job working with Made in Space, helping them design the first gravity independent 3D printer. And voila, here we are now. Years later, Field Ready is a nonprofit we started, and it's still kicking and going strong. If anyone's interested in nonprofit engineering and solving problems, please look them up. And now I'm working on sustainable homes for the future. And I'll tell you guys more about that later. But yeah, so that's how I wound up here. Someone who hated technology to helping put it in space. It's kind of a funny journey. But I was also wondering if anyone had any specific questions. Do you guys want to do a conversation now, or should we keep going with different talks? What do you guys feel like? Should we launch into the advice we would give our younger selves, or do we want to ask the audience?
Dara, I just want to add a comment. So for the people who listen to us, we had the chance at my company to work, FusionBra, to work with Dara on a hardware product called the Magic Mirror. And the name of Dara was Chief Breaker Officer, because basically as soon as you give Dara something that is with technology, she will break it. She will find where is the flow. So this is like a good perspective, I guess, for your connection with technology.
Yeah.
I'm excellent at breaking things. I can definitely test your UX.
I actually liked your question, Claire, about how we first met Dara. And I actually remember being I was at an Insight 3D printing show. It was the very first show that I attended as the director of social impact at 3D Systems. And there was this woman sitting behind Made in Space booth with a whole bunch of, information about 3D printing in space. And I looked at it and I thought, oh, wow, this would be really interesting for 3D printing in the developing world, or 3D printing in disasters, because that was part of my. And I was almost embarrassed to kind of ask that question or make that correlation, thinking that perhaps this, very scientific woman would think that I was weird. So I kind of hesitantly said, hey, would you have ever thought about, maybe using this kind of technology for 3D printing in disaster zones? And thus our very dear, very deep friendship was born that very day. turns out she was already thinking about it, already doing it, and we actually got to collaborate on a project around communautaire, right? So there was an organization called Communautaire that was doing had a 3D printing lab, which is where Dara was doing the 3D printing umbilical cords. And at 3D Systems, we ended up helping to fund the first Communautaire, which was kind of makerspace and resource center globally. And we funded one in Nepal after the Nepal earthquake and put a bunch of 3D printers in that space. And that place is still running strong, and I believe has a collaboration with Field Ready today still as well.
Indeed,
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it's super interesting because I think for the students and the teachers in the track, I think what's kind of fun about us is that we realize is that since we're the non-traditional, we all kind of carved our own way forward in additive. And I kind of wonder, because Leanne, you're working in corporate, right? And you're working on the software side and kind of building out the ecosystem, so to speak, right? And Claire, you're working on the innovation and the algorithm side, and I come from the impact side. And I wonder if there's not any questions from the audience specifically, what are the kind of things that we can answer in these realms for you? Is it about how to break into additive? Is it about who you can talk to? Because I know that I certainly learned a lot working in additive and the challenges. My favorite thing about additive and least favorite thing about additive manufacturing is that everyone thinks it's a magic box that works as soon as you push the button. And I'm sure all of you know that that's not actually the case. So I'm just curious what it is that perhaps the audience wants to know. I know we're going to do 10 minutes at the end, but I wonder if we should start a dialogue now.
There are already questions there.
Oh, really? Oh, great.
Yeah. The first one is if you could do one thing differently in your career up till now, what would you change? So let's ask Dara. I take the role now.
One thing I would change.
That's a great question.
Yeah, I think I would have believed, I know this is going to sound so cheesy, but I think I would have just really listened to myself a lot more. I always kind of took the I'm not good enough, who am I to do this role in college. Well, everyone else was like a whiz bang designer. I'm like, oh, I'm just playing with my sticks and clay. But I knew I was very mission driven. So that's what kept me going even during self-doubt. And so I think the one piece of advice would be really figure out what drives you internally. A lot of my friends who got into accounting because there was great money in it, they call me, they're miserable, they don't know what to do with their lives. And I think really the trick is, I mean, additive is amazing and has fantastic applications, but I think really as far as career path, figure out what really motivates you and drives you and what you would do even if you never get paid for it. Because that way you're always feeling satisfied. And so in my darkest moments, struggling in other countries when people's lives are actually on the line and I was struggling, I had to remind myself that this is really what I was born to do, and no one else is here, so it's got to be me, and I can do this as long as I ask for help. And that's how, and that's the other thing, like always reach out and never be afraid to ask for help, because there's no one person who changes the world. And there's no one person, Elon Musk has like hordes of people behind him, right? So does Jeff Bezos. So I think the important thing is to really just find what drives you the most at your core, and always not be afraid to ask for help and collaborate with people.
If I can add to this, I totally agree with all what you say. And as someone now, what I think is interesting, and especially type is a proof of it, there are a lot of women in 3D printing. I know that when I started like 6 years ago, there was very few women. So when you two are basically like the first women who were there battling on the field. And I think that what I love about women in 3D printing is how supportive they are. And Dara became a real mentor for me. I met her, I went to ask her a question and she helped me so much. And Leanne, when I met her, she just like geeked with me for like 6 hours. And I think what's amazing in this community is like, if you have a passion, even if you don't have the skill, reach out to women. We're here to support each other. And even, I'm not sure I'm as a great mentor as Dara or Leanne, but I know that I would be gladly to help anyone. And I think it's very important to capitalize on this community. We educate ourselves a lot by sharing.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually. I think mentorship is critical, and I know I didn't find any really that I could call mentors till I was actually in my 30s, which is kind of when my career kicked off. So having the support structure, I think, is really important, and particularly in this very male-dominated field, I think it's great to be able to reach out to other women and know that you're not alone. I've certainly had my challenges in the male-dominated fields, but that's for another time. We can have when we have our virtual happy hour. I think to Claire's point, I think this is a really interesting opportunity for community. So I'm not quite sure. I wanted to ask Nora about this, and Maddie, if there's like a meetup group that we could do to follow up on this. I also, shameless self-plugging, I'm also looking for women to collaborate with. For anyone who's interested in engineering or working, I'm doing a whole crazy project right now. I'd love to meet with you and chat with you about potential stuff and working together. And I think it's important that we all pull each other up and keep moving forward. So I'm really glad you brought that up, Claire.
Cool.
And look at this. Janet just put this up there. Oh, great, great. Okay, thanks. And I think did we lose Leanne?
Yeah.
Oh.
Did I disappear?
No, you're here.
Oh, because Maddie told me that I disappeared.
Oh, okay. I see you.
Okay, we lost Leanne. Okay, let's jump with the second question.
Yep.
How would you apply 3D printing in the current state of the world? Quote, COVID.
That's a very good question. And we were talking about... Yeah, we were talking about that a lot yesterday. Actually, I had the pleasure of being on the impact panel with Dorothy from Nation of Makers and Megan from NIH and Diana from, oh my gosh, I can't remember the company. I'm so sorry, Dana. But anyways, it was an amazing group of women. And we talked a lot about the battle of COVID with 3D printing. And I actually had some challenges with it because I think that we can do a lot with additive manufacturing. And I think that when you have a drive to do something good, that's great. But I think that instead of just jumping in, maybe poke around and see what other people are doing, because there was such a wonderful inertia for the maker movement and moving forward, but there was a lot of disconnect on the supply chain, which happens to be where I spent a lot of my time on. So while there was a lot of makers, there was a lot of need, there was no way to really connect people. And so I think that additive has been able to do unbelievable things. Something like, I think the numbers are 37 million pieces of PPE were made in America alone to support the COVID crisis, which is unbelievable. But as far as that goes, it's the same. Like we said yesterday in yesterday's talk, it was like a lot of people were creating new products or slightly tweaking them. And sometimes you can do a lot more help by just seeing what else other people have done. A lot of people want to start whole new 3D printing nonprofits. But sometimes the best support you can do is reach out to other organizations or nonprofits that are already doing the work and see if you can support them. And that comes back to mentorship again, So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts. What are your thoughts, Claire?
About COVID, for me, what I liked about the beginning of COVID is like, it was the beauty of makers. What's amazing in this community, it's like people make things happen and they do the job and work. And so I felt like this was amazing. In terms of application for COVID, I don't have a strong opinion on it. So I prefer, like, if you don't mind, to pass to another question. Okay?
Yeah. I think in the terms of COVID, we were able to make an amazing response, but I think that additive manufacturing was a great way to augment other pieces. But the challenge was when it comes to like the respirators, you need an industrial quality 3D printer so as not to have air leaks, because some people were making attachments for respirators that were actually aerosoling, like basically creating a fog of the COVID instead of actually helping people. So they're putting everyone else at risk. And when you aerosolize it, that means it gets behind the face masks. So there's just certain medical things, which in the future, I think if everyone can really reach out to like Megan's group and Nation of Makers, I know that we're talking about putting together guidelines on how to best produce COVID-safe equipment. So yeah.
We got Leanne back.
Yay, Leanne's back.
We lost you.
Leanne, can you hear us?
Leanne, can you hear
Okay.
I don't think she can hear us.
I can't hear them now.
No?
Okay, cool.
Wait, I'm going to try again. Be right back.
Okay.
Oh.
So one question that had the questions that had many votes, Dara, is how do you deal with failure in high-stake challenges?
Ooh, do you want to take that one first, and then I'll share my blunders?
Yeah. I feel like failure is a part of 3D printing. It's literally like you have a website about 3D printing fails. And so, of course, I know your question is not about that, but I think it's core in the vision of 3D printing, because 3D printing is iteration and trying and trying and trying. So I guess for me, the high stake I have is like, for example, we invest a lot of money and we try to develop a technology that has to be like super precise and super automated. So right now it's just about iteration. And I think as long as you are exploring, there is no such thing about failure, because it's just like the way to get to the next step. But I think Dara will be able like to bring a more dangerous perspective about it.
Yeah, I have lots of perspectives on failure. For one, it's only failure if you don't learn from it. I fail every day. Even Claire pointed out that I'm really good at breaking things. Turn it into a superpower. No, but seriously, high stakes and failure, it's very hard. And it's hard not to take it personally. And it's very hard when you disappoint people around you and people who count on you, especially when people's lives are counting on you. There's no easy way around it. It's a lot of pressure, but I think what can really prepare you for it, and I think this kind of brings back to a topic that is very near and dear to my heart, and that's resilience. And how do we foster resilience in ourselves? How do we foster resilience in our teams? And how do we foster resilience for the planet? And I think what's interesting about resilience and dealing with failure is, I think the reason I'm able to handle so much of it now is because I've fallen down so many times. It's just about being able to get back up again. And trusting that you're really, at the time, making the best decision you can in that moment. And so trying to do your best to forgive yourself for not knowing a better answer or having the right solution, and the ability to get back up again. And one way to, I think, really train, I think resilience and like mental resilience when it comes to these high stakes games, one way to work with it is, it's kind of look at it like a muscle. You know, when you work out at the gym and you lift a weight and you slowly build it up and the muscle gets bigger and you get toned, but then you don't work out for a few months and suddenly you're really weak. I think resilience and mental resilience is kind of like that. You have to work at it every day. And sometimes for fun, because I'm a weirdo, I like to challenge myself with getting like really small rejections frequently, because that way it's when I do get a big rejection, it's not so hard. I know that sounds super weird, but that's some of the things I do. When I was in the field in Haiti and we were teaching the guys how to use 3D printers and how to solve problems, I would encourage them to take bigger risks and to risk failing. And the person who messed up the most, I'd buy them a beer at the end of the day. So it's like, how do you make it playful, right? Because if people are too scared to move forward, you're not going to move forward, and you're not going to have the innovation, and you're not going to gain as much insight from your team or your coworkers. So I would say it's really about preparing for those big failures and having a solid support system within yourself and around you. And those are the biggest pieces for me.
I just want to add one quote that you can have would be like, what I always say to the people who developed and prototype with me is like, fail, but do it fast. Yeah. So it's kind of, we don't have like fail, learn, and iterate. One very interesting question for the topic is, what are the skills that companies look for in interns? It's Courtney who has the question. Courtney, could you just precise what kind of companies? Because you have software companies, or you have companies who have a mission but use 3D printing. Maybe it will help us a little. And Dara, if you want to start to... Dara. Leanne is
Leanne is beautiful.
She's trying to get in.
There we go. Can you hear her?
We'll get her back at some point.
She would be so good to answer these questions. That would be amazing.
She's the perfect person to ask.
Leanne, do you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes. We have a question for you. Are you ready?
I think I'm just talk about resilience. This is I'm having a very difficult
No,
right now, but I can hear you guys.
Okay,
Great.
Do you have an answer to this question? What are the skills that companies look for in interns?
Yeah. I think that's a great question, and I think it really depends on where you're focusing. But I would say I always talk about the person who has a combination of a number of different areas. So someone who both understands design, engineering, and entrepreneurship. So not being so focused in on just one particular area, but really having a transdisciplinary approach to things, I think is really, really beneficial. I also think just, general problem-solving capabilities is a huge skill, especially in the 3D printing space. Knowing how to think through a problem and to come up with creative solutions. If I could have changed one thing in my career 10 years ago, I would have started learning CAD 10 years ago. I think understanding how to actually do the design for additive manufacturing, how to really understand what those applications are, can really help drive forward so much in the space, whether you're in, whether you're an applications engineer, whether you're in the biz dev side, whether you're in the marketing side. And then another piece is visual communication and storytelling. What I'm really noticing is that being able to do visual communication to really tell a story, whether you're using, PowerPoint, whether you're using video, whether you're using something like Adobe Illustrator, whatever medium that you're using, being able to tell a story is about either the work you're doing, the work someone else is doing, work that needs to be done is really powerful. So, yeah, I would say those are a couple of them. And also, I would also encourage anyone who's looking, if you can get your hands on a 3D printer, if you can get the opportunity to do hands-on work, that's also a great skill set. And especially in this industry, knowing that someone's had that hands-on experience is, knowing the different technologies that you worked with or the different softwares that you work with or made, even if it's a small, something very small, I think just kind of gives a little bit of a leg up.
Yeah. I would add to that. So on the chat, I saw that Courtney asked more hardware-based company. So for example, Courtney, to give you an idea, my company, FusionBra, we are developing algorithm to create a hardware product that is 3D printed called Underfit. So it's a made-to-measure support for breast. And so what I would like as skills and qualities in an intern, first, it's curiosity, because 3D printing is there for a while, for 50 years now. But the thing is, it was a very industrial technology. We didn't expand yet all the possibilities of use. And so every time you come here and you have a fresh eye, it brings a lot of quality. So dream about 3D printing, go ask questions, Google them, look at what's being done, what failed, what succeeded, and be curious about it. The second one, as Leanne said about CAD, I think you have to be proactive and teach yourself some skills. Like, it's easy to get on the first step of 3D printing. But if you start to work with someone on 3D printing and you don't know what is CAD, if you don't know what is OBJ, if you don't know what it is hollowing, mesh, you're going to get lost and not taken seriously. So it's very important that you understand the main language of this world. And this, you can find it online on Skillteo blog, for example. There is a lot of info. And I think the third quality would be resilience, because you have to iterate and learn. It's very important.
Yeah, I agree with everything they both just said. And I think for the engineering women out there, I think the big thing that I found when I was hiring at Field Ready and at Made in Space is that there are a lot of people that know engineering, but the theory, not the practicality of it. It's kind of like having an architect who's never built a house before. So getting your hands dirty, I think curiosity is actually my number one as well, because even if you don't know how, but you're curious and you're hungry, you're going to figure it out, right? So I think curiosity, playing with the machines, CAD, my recommendation would be to pick one CAD and get really good at it and have a general understanding of the others, at least knowing what they are so that you can do the crossover of skills. I also think knowing 3D printing in and out is good, but I think what's interesting is that knowing where 3D printing isn't, because then you can also see where it's going. I think that the future is kind of going to be, my take is that the future of manufacturing and 3D printing is really going to be in material science. That's my instinct, and how we're going to move from the friction of learning CAD. Everyone thinks that 3D printing is a magic button. No one knows that you actually have to learn CAD to create. Otherwise, you're just downloading, images off the internet to print plastic things, which is not really good for anyone. So I think really getting those basic fundamental skills. And then as an intern, what I'm looking for is similar things like curiosity, drive. I'm looking for someone who's interested in pushing boundaries, is also great at sketching and prototyping. And also, I think collaboration is a really critical skill.
Yeah.
You need to really be able to work with a team. And I think also back to that resilience, learning how to take critical feedback and then also share and figure out how to change and allow yourself to work towards the better of the, so sometimes like, what was it in school? They called it like, it was a terrible term, but it was like kill your babies. We'd get so attached to, I know it's a terrible term, so attached to our product we were developing that we would ignore all the signs that it wasn't the right solution. So I think it's really important to be able to learn to let go of what things are and take insight from your teammates.
Yeah,
those would be.
So just a heads up, we have 9 minutes left, I think. So maybe time for one question if you want to add last questions. And I will just jump on what you say about like kill the baby.
I know it's a terrible term.
Terrible term.
You'll never forget it. So,
but I think something that is super important is like 3D printing is a mean of production, and no one should ever forget about it. And what's beautiful about it, 3D printing comes with 3D software and 3D technologies. And 3D software and technologies can go way further than just 3D printing. And if you handle well the software and these technologies, you can use 3D printing, you can use 3D kneading, you can use like so many other technologies. So I would say it's important. Dara gave an awful expression with a wonderful messaging in this idea that 3D printing is amazing, but it's not the end. It's just a mean.
Yeah.
So in terms of,
yeah, is there any other questions? I'm having a hard time reading the chat.
Yeah, I know. It's why I took over. It's like there is a chat, participant, and Q&A. Oh, so there is a new one. How do you see beyond the glamour and excitement of new technologies like 3D printing and recognize what's great about it and what's not? Ooh,
shiny objects. Do you want to take this one, Claire? We just had this discussion earlier today, actually.
Yeah, I'm going to start. So there are a lot. So I think I see 3D printing like an optimization of production. It's like, for example, on fashion, fabric is great, and we are making so many great progress with fabric, but it can be augmented with 3D printing on the part we need. It's very important to understand what 3D printed is good for. 3D printed is not good for big and large pieces. It's not good for pieces who need to be very flexible. It's good for technical parts that need to be custom. And so for me, I see through the glamour and excitement of new technologies. So for example, depending on the media, because I think medias have done a lot of bad things in 2014, notably when everyone was saying, yeah, you're going to push on a button and you're going to get something. No, it's something way more complicated. So I'm always going to see if 3D printing is like bringing value in terms of time, customization, and maybe health benefits, some things that brings more like meaning and value to the product.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. As soon as Leanne can jump in, please jump in, Leanne, if you hear us. But I think to see behind the glamour, I'm always excited. I'm like, I don't know, they used to call me the puppy at Made in Space because I get all excited and jump in like, what are we doing today, folks? So I'm very shiny object excited with technology. But I think the big thing about 3D printing is that once you're actually into it, it's not all that fabulous. I'm very controversial. I have a love-hate relationship with 3D printing. I hate it and I love it. I love it and I hate it. It just depends on the day. So it can do amazing things, but you have to remember that it's just a tool. It's not the end-all be-all. And if you know where you want to get to, 3D printing might not be the solution, but becoming very familiar with all of the tools and technologies that are out there and just kind of digging a little deeper and using critical thinking. And if you want to know it's the right tool or if it's the real deal, you know, go around and ask people questions like, is this really this? For example, for me, I get a little confused on when people talk about 3D printing textiles because I'm trying to see if they're talking about actually using an FDM machine like a MakerBot to make cloth, which doesn't quite make sense to me. But if we talk about like my friend Lisa Lang in Portugal, she's doing this amazing 3D loom. And if you think about that, that's been around forever. That's how we make hosiery. So it's really just about, sometimes it's marketing, like what Claire said, and sometimes it's about finding the right tool for what you're trying to create. And so I think that's part of it, really. It's getting excited and then digging a little deeper. Leanne, you want to chime in?
Yeah, you know, I agree. I 100% agree that, you know, 3D printing is just one tool in a very broad toolbox. But I also think that there is value in the imagination and the kind of beginner's minds of visioning what could happen in the future, even if the technology today isn't ready to catch up to the reality of what that vision is. I think it helps to drive us forward because a lot of the things that we wouldn't have even thought were possible 5 to 10 years ago are possible today. And I think about things like, you know, 5 years ago, it was only possible to print as small as your thumbnail or as big as like a hydroelectric stator, right? But today, because we've combined 3D printing and robotics, you could print as big as, you know, as big as anything, as big as a house or even bigger, because you can, you know, stick a 3D, you could turn kind of an Axis robot into a 3D printer, and we can print as small as a nanoparticle. You know, I think about how 5 years ago we were only printing in about 60 materials, and now there are thousands of materials, and there are printers that are able to do multi-material, and we're starting to think about how we can 3D print integrated electronics. You know, the machines are getting faster and cheaper. So I think that that's part of what's exciting is, you know, obviously always being pragmatic and recognizing that, you know, sometimes we have a bigger vision than we are currently capable of doing. But I'm really excited about, you know, what will happen in the future with things like 3D printing construction or new capabilities in multi-material, and also the way that software now is enabling us to do things like modulate microstructure or think about, you know, integrating soft and hard materials, or, you know, really figure out ways to design for translucency or so. Definitely keeping that pragmatic idealist approach where you're visioning big for what can happen while also being practical about what's real today.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, thinking about like where you want to be in 10 years and then kind of reverse engineering so that you can create how to get to that point in 10 years is kind of right. I think that's the fun part.
About practicality, ladies, we have like 2 minutes left, and one question that I think would be useful to wrap up on. It says Professor Darlene Forrest-Labar, who asked, I have very creative students, 3D printing, product designer, 3D modelers, and programmers looking for internship. Do you have any opportunities, and how can they contact you? We have 1 minute left to answer this question.
Find me on LinkedIn. I'm interested in taking some interns currently. Leanne, I know you guys have lots of projects on the university side. And Claire, do you have any?
And I'm going to put my coordinate, my how to reach me on the chat. So I'm the founder of FusionBra. We are always looking for interesting people to join the team. So feel free to reach out.
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, and I would like to put a plug. Autodesk is participating in an innovation channel.
Oh yeah, there's a whole competition.
Amazing.
So, yeah, reach out to Leanne. She's got an amazing competition going right now with a $15,000 prize, I think. So everyone should definitely look up Leanne on LinkedIn. Her name's Leanne Gluck, Gluck, and I'm Dara Dotz, Dara, new word Dotz, Dotz. And give us a holler. Thank you so much for listening. And any more questions, please feel free to reach out.